I was elbow-deep in receipts and dirty laundry when I found the hotel key card. Room 823, the Fairmont. Tucked beside a note in Nora's purse. Same room, same time, same rules. If this was a game, I'd just found my invitation. The rain hammered against our kitchen window like an angry creditor demanding payment. I'd been sorting through Nora's things, not snooping, mind you, just looking for the gas receipts she'd promised to organize 6 months ago. My forensic accounting brain couldn't help but notice patterns. Thursday nights, late meetings, new perfume on a Tuesday morning. "Dad, can you drive me to Emma's?" Julie's voice cut through my thoughts. My daughter stood in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking exactly like her mother at 16, same auburn hair, same way of tilting her head when she wanted something. "Your mom's not home yet?" I asked, sliding the key card into my shirt pocket. "Working late again." Julie rolled her eyes. "Some big case. She said she might not be back until midnight." I checked my watch. 7:30. The Fairmont was downtown, maybe 20 minutes away. My fingers found the key card through the fabric of my shirt. "Sure, kiddo. Let me grab my keys." The drive to Emma's house gave me time to think. 11 months of suspicions. 11 months of Nora telling me I was paranoid, that I needed therapy, that my trust issues were damaging our marriage. Dr. Patterson, our counselor, had a field day with my concerns. "Reid," he'd say in that patronizing tone, "successful women often work irregular hours. Your wife is a partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms." But numbers don't lie. People do. I'd been tracking patterns without realizing it. The forensic accountant's curse. Thursday meetings that never appeared on her calendar. Credit card charges at restaurants I'd never heard of. New lingerie purchases that never made it into our bedroom. After dropping Julie off, I sat in my car outside the Fairmont for exactly 47 minutes. Long enough to see Nora's silver BMW pull into the valet lane. Long enough to watch her walk through the lobby doors with Victor Hallis. Victor Hallis, CEO of Hallis Manufacturing, pillar of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, country club tennis champion, married to Jenna Ardell Hallis, who'd been Nora's sorority sister at Northwestern. I knew Victor from the club. We'd played golf twice, shared drinks at the 19th hole. He had that easy charm that came with inherited wealth and an Ivy League education. The kind of man who called everyone sport and never picked up a check. The kind of man my wife apparently found irresistible. I drove home through empty streets, windshield wipers fighting the rain. Our house sat dark, except for the porch light. A modest 2-story colonial in Riverside Heights, the kind of neighborhood where people still knew their neighbors' names and borrowed lawnmowers. My grandmother had left it to me, mortgage-free, when I was 25. Nora always said it was too small, too old-fashioned. She wanted something in Eastbrook Hills, near the country club. Now I understood why. The garage door rumbled closed behind me. I sat in the darkness, engine ticking as it cooled, and made a decision. If Nora wanted to play games, I'd learn the rules. But first, I needed proof. Thursday came again like a recurring decimal, predictable, inevitable. I positioned myself across from the Fairmont at 6:15, telephoto lens ready. My old Treasury Department surveillance training came back like muscle memory, patience, observation, documentation. Nora arrived at 6:43. Victor's black Escalade was already in the valet lane. Click. Nora stepping out of her BMW, smoothing her skirt. Click. Victor meeting her at the elevator bank, his hand on the small of her back. Click. The two of them disappearing behind closing elevator doors. I waited 3 hours. When they emerged, Nora's hair was different, messier, like she'd run her fingers through it. Victor's tie was loosened. They kissed goodbye in the lobby, not the polite peck of business associates, but something deeper, hungrier. Click, click, click. The third Thursday, I got bold. I followed them upstairs, used the old lost businessman routine to get past hotel security. Room 823 was at the end of the hall, isolated, private. I could hear voices through the door, laughter, intimate conversation, the unmistakable sounds of a marriage being dismantled. I had my evidence. Now I needed a strategy. Back home, I spread the photos across my desk like a forensic accountant reviewing suspicious transactions. Each image told part of the story, but together they painted a complete picture of betrayal. Nora entering the hotel, Victor's possessive touch, their goodbye kiss. Timestamps proved this wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern, a routine, a deliberate choice. My phone buzzed. Text from Nora. "Working late again? Don't wait up." I looked at the timestamp on my photos. She was probably in that room right now with him, while texting me lies. The rage came in waves, hot, overwhelming, clarifying. For 11 months I'd questioned myself, doubted my instincts, let therapists and friends convince me I was imagining things. But the camera doesn't lie. I opened my laptop and started making lists. Victor's world was built on reputation, respectability, carefully maintained appearances. His wife Jenna was old money. Her family had founded half the businesses in town. His position at Hallis Manufacturing depended on board approval. His standing at St. Matthew's required moral authority. All of it vulnerable to the right kind of pressure. I spent the weekend researching, planning, preparing. Nora was at a legal conference in Chicago, or so she said. Julie was with friends. I had the house to myself and 48 hours to craft the perfect response. Monday morning, I visited 4 different post offices across the city. Each envelope was carefully addressed, professionally formatted, containing identical sets of photographs and a brief, factual cover letter. No emotional language, no threats, just documentation and dates. The first envelope went to Jenna Ardell Hallis at her home address. The second went to Father Mackenzie at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. The third went to the membership committee at Eastbrook Country Club. The fourth went to the board of directors at Hallis Manufacturing. I mailed them on different days, from different locations, using my old Treasury protocols to ensure simultaneous delivery. Tuesday for Jenna, Wednesday for the church, Thursday for the country club, Friday for the board. Then I went home and waited. The first call came Friday evening. Jenna Hallis, her voice steady but strained. "Reid, this is Jenna. I think we need to talk." "About what?" I asked, though I knew. "About the photographs you sent me, about my husband and your wife." There was a long pause. Rain started again outside, drumming against the windows. "He promised me it was over," Jenna continued. 2 years ago, when I found out the first time. Your wife was the one who told me it had ended. At my daughter's baptism, she looked me in the eye and swore it was finished. 2 years. This had been going on for 2 years. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," I said. "No." Her voice was firm now. "I'm grateful. I needed to know the truth." Saturday brought more calls. Father Mackenzie, diplomatic but concerned about Victor's position as treasurer of the church finance committee. The country club's membership director, asking about the allegations against one of their prominent members. But the real fireworks started Monday morning. I was at my office, a small forensic accounting firm downtown, when my phone rang. Victor Hallis, his usual confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. "You son of a gun," he said without preamble. "What the heck do you think you're doing?" "I'm not sure what you mean, Victor. The photographs, the letters. You're trying to destroy me." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the gray November sky. "I'm just sharing information, thought people had a right to know." "You want money? Is that what this is about? Name your price." "This isn't about money, Victor." "Then what? What do you want?" I thought about that for a moment. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? For my wife to come home and pretend nothing had happened? I want you to understand something, I said finally. You took my wife. You took my marriage. You made me question my own sanity for 11 months. Now you get to live with the consequences. The board is meeting this afternoon, Victor said, his voice cracking. My wife has filed for separation. The church wants me to step down from the finance committee. Sounds like you have a busy day ahead. I hung up. Tuesday morning's newspaper carried a small item in the business section. Hallis Manufacturing CEO takes leave of absence. No details, just a brief statement about Victor stepping back for personal reasons. Nora came home that evening for the first time in a week. She looked tired, older somehow, like the weight of her secrets had finally caught up with her. We need to talk, she said. I was in the kitchen, making dinner for Julie and me. Spaghetti with meat sauce, nothing fancy, but it was Julie's favorite. About what? I asked, not looking up from the stove. You know about what. I turned to face her. My wife of 18 years, mother of my children, the woman I'd loved since college. She was still beautiful, more so, maybe, with that hint of vulnerability in her eyes. Do I? She pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. Victor told me what you did, the photographs, the letters. Ah. I stirred the sauce. And what exactly did I do? You destroyed him, his marriage, his job, his reputation, everything. I nodded. Seems like a fair trade. Reid, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, figure out how to fix this. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Fix this? Nora, you've been lying to me for 2 years. 2 years of making me think I was crazy, that I was imagining things. 2 years of therapy sessions where I apologized for being suspicious. She was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just did. Things don't just happen, Nora. People make choices. You chose Victor. You chose to lie. You chose to make me doubt myself every single day for 2 years. Julie walked into the kitchen, backpack over her shoulder. She looked between us, reading the tension in the room with the keen perception of a teenager. Are you guys getting divorced? She asked bluntly. Nora and I looked at each other. The question hung in the air like smoke. We're talking through some things, Nora said finally. Julie nodded. Good, because whatever's been going on, it needs to stop. This house has felt like a funeral home for months. She headed upstairs, leaving us alone with the weight of her words. She's right, Nora said softly. This has to stop. I turned off the burner and faced my wife. You're absolutely right. It does. The envelope arrived in Nora's briefcase on a Wednesday morning. I'd slipped it in while she was showering, nestled between her legal briefs like a time bomb waiting to explode. Inside were copies of the same photographs I'd sent to Victor's world, along with a few extras, screenshots of text messages I'd recovered from our phone bill. Can't wait for tonight. Same rules apply. V. You make me feel alive again. N. Your husband suspects nothing? V. Reid's too busy with his numbers to notice anything. N. That last one cut deepest. While I'd been drowning in self-doubt, she'd been laughing about my blindness with her lover. I was at my office when she found them. My phone exploded with calls, 5 in a row, each one going to voicemail. Then the texts started. How dare you go through my private things? This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer. I let her rage. There's something liberating about watching someone's carefully constructed lies collapse in real time, like watching a house of cards fall, inevitable once the foundation shifts. The real show started that evening. Nora's father was celebrating his 70th birthday at Romano's, the Italian place where he'd proposed to her mother 45 years ago. 3 generations of the Kellerman family packed into the back room, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandchildren, the kind of gathering where family stories get retold and embarrassing photos get passed around. I arrived fashionably late, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing my best smile. Nora shot me a warning look from across the room, but I just waved and made my way to the head table. "Reid!" Nora's father, Frank, stood to greet me with a bear hug. "Glad you could make it. Thought you might be too busy with those numbers of yours." "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Frank. You only turned 70 once." I took my seat next to Nora, who was rigid with tension. Her mother, Patricia, was holding court at the far end of the table, regaling the cousins with stories about Frank's early days as a plumbing contractor. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank called out, tapping his wine glass with a fork. "Before we eat, I'd like to say a few words." The room quieted. Frank launched into a speech about family, loyalty, the importance of keeping promises, standard grandfather material, but I could see Nora squirming in her seat. When Frank finished, he raised his glass. "To family! To family!" the room echoed. I stood up, my own glass in hand. "Actually, Frank, if I may, I'd like to add something." Nora grabbed my wrist. "Reid, don't." But I was already talking. "I want to talk about promises, about the vows we make and the trust we build." I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the screenshots I'd prepared. Nora and I have been married for 18 years. 18 years of promises. 43 family members watching, waiting. But promises only matter if both people keep them. I started reading from my phone. "Can't wait for tonight. Same rules apply." That's from Victor Hallis to my wife, dated 3 weeks ago. Patricia's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. "You make me feel alive again." That's Nora's response. Frank's face went white. "Reid, what are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth, Frank. Something your daughter forgot how to do." I scrolled to the next message. "Your husband suspects nothing? Reid's too busy with his numbers to notice anything." Nora's brother Michael stood up abruptly. "That's enough." "Is it?" I looked around the room. "Because I've got 2 years' worth of messages here. 2 years of lies, manipulation, gaslighting. 2 years of being told I was paranoid while my wife was sleeping with Victor Hallis every Thursday night at the Fairmont Hotel." The silence was deafening. Patricia had gone pale as paper. Frank looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "You want to know what's really funny?" I continued. "I've been going to therapy, paying $200 an hour to figure out why I don't trust my wife. Turns out my instincts were perfect." Nora was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "Please stop." "Why? Because it's embarrassing? Because your family is finding out what kind of person you really are?" Michael stepped toward me. "Get out, now." I pocketed my phone and smiled. "Happy birthday, Frank. Thanks for the reminder about keeping promises." I walked out to stunned silence, leaving Nora to explain herself to 3 generations of disappointed family members. The fallout was swift and comprehensive. Patricia called the next morning, her voice shaky with anger and grief. "How could you do that to us? To Frank? On his birthday?" "I didn't do anything, Patricia. I just shared some information. You humiliated our daughter in front of the entire family." "Your daughter humiliated herself. I just provided the documentation." The line went quiet for a long moment. Then, "Don't call here again." But the real consequences were just beginning. Victor's world was imploding in spectacular fashion. The board of directors at Hallis Manufacturing had voted him out in an emergency session. The church had quietly asked him to resign from all committees. The country club was reviewing his membership status. More importantly, Jenna Hallis was done playing the understanding wife. She called me Thursday afternoon, her voice crisp and businesslike. "Reid, it's Jenna. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For giving me the evidence I needed. My lawyer filed separation papers this morning. Victor's moving out this weekend." I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sympathy. "I'm sorry it came to this." "I'm not. 23 years of marriage, and I spent the last 5 wondering if I was losing my mind. The late meetings, the business trips, the phone calls he took in the garage. I knew something was wrong, but he made me feel crazy for questioning him. The parallel was obvious. How long has this been going on? 2 years that I know of, probably longer. She paused. Your wife came to our daughter's baptism last spring, looked me right in the eye, and told me she understood how hard it was to trust again after infidelity. Said she was proud of me for giving Victor a second chance. The calculation was breathtaking. Nora had used Jenna's pain as cover for her own deception, offering comfort while actively continuing the affair that was causing that pain. What happens now? I asked. Now? Now Victor learns what it's like to lose everything that matters. The house, the kids, the respect of everyone who ever looked up to him. He's about to discover that actions have consequences. Friday brought news that Victor had been arrested for driving under the influence. Apparently, he'd been drinking at Murphy's Tavern, a far cry from the country club bar where he usually held court. The arrest made the local paper, complete with a mugshot that showed a man who'd aged 20 years and 20 days. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt empty, like I'd won a game I never wanted to play. Nora came home that weekend with her tail between her legs. She'd been staying at her sister's place since the birthday dinner debacle, but apparently even family loyalty has its limits. We need to talk, she said, standing in our kitchen like a stranger. I'm listening. She looked around the room, at the breakfast table where we'd shared 18 years of morning coffee, at the refrigerator covered with Julie's artwork from elementary school, at the window where she used to stand and watch for my car to pull into the driveway. I'm sorry, she said finally. For which part? All of it. The affair, the lying, making you think you were paranoid. All of it. I nodded. Okay. Okay? That's it? What do you want me to say, Nora? That I forgive you? That we can pretend this never happened? She sat down across from me, the same chair she'd occupied for thousands of meals. I want you to say we can work this out. Can we? I think so, if we both try. I studied her face, the woman I'd loved since college, the mother of my children, the person who'd shared my bed and my dreams for nearly 2 decades. She looked sincere, remorseful, desperate. She also looked like someone who'd only been caught, not someone who'd actually changed. Here's what I think, I said. I think you're sorry you got caught. I think you're sorry Victor's life exploded and yours is next. I think you're sorry the whole town knows what you did. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about 2 years of gaslighting. 2 years of making me question my own sanity. 2 years of therapy sessions where I apologized for being suspicious while you were texting your lover about how clueless I was. She was crying again. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, and now we both have to live with the consequences. What does that mean? I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who'd been the center of my universe for so long. It means I'm done pretending this didn't happen. I'm done pretending we can go back to the way things were. I'm done pretending I can trust you. So that's it? 18 years of marriage, and you're just throwing it away? I'm not throwing anything away, Nora. You already did that. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor to my office. Stacy Morrison, Nora's best friend since law school, sat in my waiting room like a perfectly dressed harbinger of doom. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her navy suit crisp enough to cut glass. She didn't fidget, didn't check her phone. She sat with her back straight and her hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes forward, projecting patience that felt rehearsed. The receptionist gave me a look when I stepped out of my office, half curiosity, half warning, as if even she could sense the pressure Stacy carried with her into a room. Reid, she said, standing as I approached. We need to talk. Her voice was calm, modulated, already positioned to control the conversation. Stacy had always been a force of nature, the kind of woman who organized charity galas and intimidated waiters with equal efficiency. She'd been Nora's maid of honor, godmother to our twins, the third wheel at countless dinner parties over the years. She knew my routines, my tells, the cadence of my temper. That familiarity made her presence here feel less like a visit and more like an incursion. "My office is right here," I said, gesturing toward the door. She followed me in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like a countdown timer. I'd renovated this space 3 years ago. Exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, the kind of masculine aesthetic that made clients feel like they were hiring someone serious. Stacy's eyes flicked around once, cataloging everything, the way attorneys do when they enter unfamiliar territory. "Coffee?" I offered. "This isn't a social call." Stacy sat down across from my desk, crossing her legs with military precision. "What you did to Victor was unconscionable." I settled into my chair, deliberately unhurried, studying her face. Stacy had perfected the art of controlled anger, the kind of fury that came wrapped in perfect manners and professional courtesy. No raised voice, no overt hostility, just pressure applied exactly where it hurt. I documented infidelity and shared that information with interested parties. Hardly unconscionable. You destroyed a man's life. He destroyed his own life. I just provided the evidence. She leaned forward, forearms resting lightly on her knees, her green eyes flashing with something sharper than indignation. "Victor Hallis is a good man who made a mistake. One mistake, and you've turned him into a pariah." "One mistake?" I pulled up the photos on my computer, turned the screen toward her. "This was taken 3 weeks ago. This one 2 weeks before that. This one a month before that. Shall I continue?" The glow from the monitor reflected faintly in her eyes as she glanced at the images. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "People are complicated, Reid. Marriage is complicated. Sometimes good people make bad choices." "You're right. Sometimes they do." I closed the laptop, the click sounding louder than it should have. "The question is, what happens next? What happens next is you stop this vendetta before it gets worse." "Worse for whom?" "For everyone. For Victor. For Nora. For your children." She paused, letting the last word hang in the air. "For you." There was something in her tone, a subtle threat wrapped in concern, not overt, not crude, strategic. I'd known Stacy for 15 years, but suddenly she felt like a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Are you threatening me, Stacy?" "I'm trying to help you see reason. This path you're on, it doesn't end well for anyone. I appreciate your concern." "Do you?" She stood up, smoothing her skirt as though the conversation had already reached its conclusion. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you've lost perspective. You're so focused on revenge that you can't see what you're destroying." "And what's that?" "Your family, your reputation, your future." She moved toward the door, then paused, one hand on the handle. "Nora loves you, Reid. She made a mistake, but she loves you." The words landed with a practiced softness, like they'd been polished before delivery. Funny way of showing it. People show love in different ways. Sometimes we don't recognize it until it's gone. The door closed quietly behind her. After she left, I sat in my office thinking about that conversation. The room felt smaller without her in it, the air still carrying the faint trace of her perfume. There'd been something off about it, not just Stacy's defense of Victor, but the way she'd spoken about Nora, like she knew something I didn't, like she was negotiating from a position of information I didn't yet have. I'd always found their friendship puzzling. Stacy was single, successful, fiercely independent. Nora was married, maternal, content with traditional roles. They seemed like opposites, but they'd been inseparable since law school. I'd written it off as balance, as women finding what they lacked in each other. Now it felt less benign. That evening, I decided to do some digging. Stacy Morrison had graduated from Northwestern Law 3 years ahead of Nora. She'd worked at Patterson and Associates for 2 years before starting her own practice specializing in family law. Divorced twice, no children, lived alone in a converted loft downtown. But the interesting part was her client list. I'd kept meticulous records of everyone who'd ever crossed my professional path. Occupational hazard of being a forensic accountant. 3 years ago, Stacy had hired me to investigate her second husband's finances during their divorce proceedings. The investigation had been routine until I'd discovered that her husband, David Morrison, had been systematically hiding assets in offshore accounts. Not just hiding them, stealing them. David had been embezzling from his employer, a medical device company, for over 5 years. I'd documented everything, provided testimony, helped Stacy's lawyers build an airtight case. David had lost everything: his job, his freedom, his reputation. Last I'd heard, he was serving 8 years in federal prison. Stacy had thanked me profusely at the time, sent a bottle of expensive wine, recommended my services to other attorneys, even invited Nora and me to her post-divorce celebration party. So why was she suddenly concerned about my vendetta against Victor? I spent the next few days watching, listening, paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. Stacy called Nora every day, sometimes multiple times. She'd been unusually present during the past few months, showing up at family events, offering to babysit the twins, inserting herself into our lives in ways that seemed helpful, but now felt intrusive. The breakthrough came Thursday evening. I was picking up Julie from soccer practice when I saw Stacy's silver Lexus in the parking lot of Murphy's Tavern, the same dive bar where Victor had been arrested for drunk driving. Curious, I parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, Stacy emerged from the bar with Victor Hallis. They weren't touching, weren't obviously together, but there was an intimacy in their body language that made my forensic accountant brain start calculating possibilities. I followed them, carefully, professionally, using every surveillance technique I'd learned in my Treasury days. They drove separately to a small office building downtown, parked in the underground garage, took the same elevator to the 7th floor. The building directory listed Morrison Family Law on the 7th floor. The letters were etched in brushed metal, clean and professional, the kind of signage meant to project trust and discretion. I stood across the street and watched the glass doors, counting reflections in the late afternoon sun, waiting. Victor's car was already there. So was hers. They stayed inside for 2 hours. When they emerged, Victor looked better than he had in weeks, more confident, less defeated. His shoulders were back, his stride easier, as if something heavy had been lifted from him behind closed doors. Stacy walked him to his car, put her hand on his arm, said something that made him smile. Then she handed him an envelope. It was thick, the kind that didn't hold just paperwork, but reassurance. A promise, maybe. Victor tucked it under his arm like something precious, said something I couldn't hear, and drove away without looking back. I waited until they'd both left before approaching the building. The security guard was reading a newspaper, one leg hooked around his chair, barely glanced up when I flashed my old Treasury ID and mumbled something about a federal investigation. He nodded with the reflexive compliance of someone who'd learned not to ask questions that came with acronyms. The lobby swallowed me without resistance. The elevator ride to the 7th floor gave me time to think. Stacy Morrison, family law attorney. Victor Hallis, recently separated CEO. Late-night meetings in her office, too late, too frequent, too private. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't like. Morrison Family Law occupied half of the 7th floor, a modest suite with a reception area, conference room, and 2 private offices. The door was locked, but locks had never been much of an obstacle for someone with my background. Inside, the air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and expensive coffee. Stacy's office was exactly what I'd expected: tasteful furniture, expensive art, law books arranged with mathematical precision. everything curated to suggest control, authority, competence. But it was her desk that caught my attention. Specifically, the file folder labeled Hallis v. Separation Agreement. It sat just slightly out of alignment with the others, like it had been accessed recently. I opened it carefully, aware of the quiet, of how loud paper sounded when there was no one around to hear it. I photographed every page: Victor's financial disclosures, asset valuations, proposed settlement terms. Clean, aggressive, expertly structured, but buried in the middle of the stack was something that made my stomach drop. A private investigator's report on Reid Trenner. My name looked wrong on the page, stripped of context, reduced to bullet points and risk assessments. Credit history, employment records, personal relationships, daily routines. Photos taken from across streets I recognized. Notes on habits I hadn't realized were habits. Everything someone would need to destroy my life systematically and efficiently. And at the bottom of the report, a handwritten note in Stacy's distinctive script. Recommend proceeding with Phase 2. Subject is isolated and vulnerable. The words were clinical, detached, final. I photographed everything, returned the files to their original positions, and left the building with my mind racing. Stacy wasn't just defending Victor, she was actively working against me. But why? The answer came to me as I sat in my car in the parking garage, engine off, hands still on the steering wheel. David Morrison, Stacy's second husband, the embezzler I'd helped destroy 3 years ago. I'd testified, provided documentation, watched him get sentenced. I'd cost Stacy her marriage, her husband's freedom, probably a significant amount of money she'd never recovered. And now she was returning the favor. But this wasn't just about revenge. This was about something bigger, more complex. Stacy had been planning this for months, maybe years. The affair between Nora and Victor wasn't just infidelity, it was a weapon. And I'd walked right into the trap. My phone buzzed with a text from Nora. "Working late again, don't wait up." I checked the time, 9:30 on a Thursday night. The same time she used to meet Victor at the Fairmont. But Victor was finished, his life in ruins. So where was my wife really going? I started my car and drove toward downtown, following a hunch that was growing stronger with every mile. The Fairmont Hotel sat like a monument to my humiliation, its windows glowing against the night sky. I parked across the street and waited. At 10:15, Nora's silver BMW pulled into the valet lane. She stepped out wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one that made her look 10 years younger. But she wasn't meeting Victor. She was meeting Stacy. They embraced in the lobby like lovers, not friends. Intimate, passionate, desperate. Hands lingering too long, foreheads touching. Then they disappeared into the elevator, heading upstairs to continue whatever game they'd been playing at my expense. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the windows of the 8th floor, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My wife wasn't just having an affair with Victor Hallis. She was having an affair with Stacy Morrison. And Victor was just the cover story, the decoy designed to hide the real betrayal. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and staring at the photographs I'd taken from Stacy's office, trying to piece together a puzzle that kept changing shape every time I thought I understood it. The private investigator's report was thorough. 3 months of surveillance, financial analysis, psychological profiling. Someone had been studying me like a laboratory specimen, looking for weaknesses, pressure points, ways to destroy me systematically. But the most damning evidence was a series of emails I'd photographed from Stacy's computer, messages between her and someone identified only as N that painted a picture of manipulation so sophisticated it took my breath away. R is becoming suspicious, may need to accelerate timeline. S. Victor is getting nervous, thinks R knows about the hotel. N. Let him know, we need R to act predictably. His Treasury training makes him dangerous if he starts thinking strategically. S. What about the children? N. Collateral damage. You can rebuild that relationship after the divorce. S. And if R fights back? N. He won't. Men like Reid follow rules, even when the game is rigged against them. His moral code is his weakness. S. They'd been playing me for months, maybe years. Every therapy session where I'd questioned my sanity, every moment of self-doubt, every time I'd wondered if I was being paranoid, it had all been orchestrated. Victor Hallis wasn't Nora's lover, he was her accomplice, and Stacy Morrison wasn't just my wife's best friend. She was the architect of my destruction. I spent Friday morning making phone calls, cashing in favors, preparing for war. If Stacy wanted to play games, I'd show her what a forensic accountant with Treasury training could do when he stopped following rules. My first call was to Marcus Webb, an old colleague from my federal days who now ran a private investigation firm in Chicago. Marcus specialized in the kind of deep background research that could uncover secrets people thought they'd buried forever. "Reid Trenner," Marcus said when he answered. "Haven't heard from you in years. What can I do for you?" "I need everything you can find on Stacy Morrison, born 1978, Northwestern Law, currently practicing family law here in town, and I need it fast." "How fast?" "By Monday morning." Marcus whistled. "That's expensive fast." "Money's no object. Must be some story. You have no idea." My second call was to Jennifer Chen, a computer forensics expert I'd worked with on several cases. If Stacy and Nora had been communicating electronically, Jennifer could find evidence that would make my hotel photographs look like amateur hour. "I need you to recover deleted communications from multiple devices," I told her. "Emails, text messages, social media, anything that might show coordination between two parties. Legal or gray area. Let's call it aggressive. My favorite kind. Send me the details." The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I moved money into accounts Nora couldn't access, secured important documents, made arrangements for Julie's care. If this was going to be a war, I intended to win it. Monday morning brought Marcus's report, 47 pages of background information that painted a picture of Stacy Morrison I'd never imagined. Born Stacy Lynn Kowalski in Detroit. Father was a small-time criminal who'd served 2 stretches in state prison. Mother was an alcoholic who died when Stacy was 16. No siblings, no extended family, no safety net except her own intelligence and ruthless ambition. She'd worked her way through college and law school, graduating with honors despite working 30 hours a week to pay expenses. Her first marriage had lasted 18 months. Husband number 1 had been a law school classmate who'd helped her study for the bar exam, then found himself divorced 6 months after she'd passed. Husband number 2, David Morrison, had been a different story. David had money, connections, social standing, everything Stacy had always wanted. She'd married him for his assets and divorced him when I'd exposed his embezzlement. But the most interesting part of Marcus's report was Stacy's financial situation. Despite her successful law practice, she was drowning in debt. Student loans, credit cards, a mortgage on the downtown loft that was underwater by $200,000. She needed money, badly. And Nora had money. Or would have, after our divorce. Jennifer Chen's report arrived Tuesday morning via encrypted email. She'd recovered 18 months of communications between Stacy and Nora, including messages they'd thought were permanently deleted. The conversation threads told the whole story. It had started innocently enough. Stacy complaining about her financial troubles, Nora offering sympathy and small loans. But gradually, the conversations had turned darker. "Sometimes I think about what would happen if David hadn't been caught," Stacy had written 6 months ago. "We'd still be married, and I'd be financially secure instead of drowning in debt." "I'm sorry Reid's investigation caused problems for you," Nora had replied. "I never thought about the collateral damage." "It's not your fault. but sometimes I wonder if Reid realizes how his work affects real people. From there, it was a short step to more explicit resentment. Reid destroyed my marriage, Stacy had written, turned David into a criminal, me into a victim, all in the name of justice. He was just doing his job. Was he, or was he showing off, proving how smart he is, how thorough? Men like Reid don't care who gets hurt as long as they get to be right. The messages showed a gradual escalation, Stacy planting seeds of doubt about our marriage, questioning my motives, suggesting that I was controlling, manipulative, possibly dangerous. "Has Reid ever made you feel like you're going crazy?" Stacy had asked 3 months ago. "What do you mean?" "The way he questions everything, analyzes everything. David used to say it was like living with a human lie detector. Sometimes I feel like I can't do anything without Reid noticing and commenting on it. That's not normal, Nora. That's psychological abuse." And there it was, the moment my marriage had been weaponized against me. The plan that followed was elegant in its simplicity. Stacy would create a fake affair between Nora and Victor Hallis, knowing that my investigative instincts would kick in. I'd gather evidence, expose the affair, destroy Victor's life, and prove Stacy's point about my dangerous obsessiveness. Meanwhile, Stacy would comfort Nora through the crisis, gradually convincing her that I was the real problem. The fake affair would become grounds for divorce, with Stacy representing Nora and ensuring she got the maximum settlement. Victor Hallis was just a convenient patsy, a man whose reputation and marriage Stacy was willing to sacrifice to achieve her goals. But the real revelation was in the final batch of messages, sent just 3 days ago. "Reid's getting suspicious," Nora had written. "He's asking questions about you, about Victor, about things that don't add up." "Let him investigate," Stacy had replied. "The more obsessed he becomes, the more unstable he looks. We're almost at the finish line." What if he finds out the truth? He won't. Men like Reid see what they expect to see. He thinks he's hunting an affair, so that's what he'll find. And after? After, you'll be free. Financially secure, emotionally healthy, ready to start over. We both will be. I printed every message, organized them chronologically, prepared them for distribution. If Stacy wanted to play the long game, she was about to learn that I'd been playing it longer. Wednesday evening, I called a family meeting. Julie was at her friend Emma's house. I'd arranged that earlier, knowing this conversation would get ugly. Nora sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same spot where we'd shared 18 years of meals, dreams, arguments, reconciliations. The house was too quiet without Julie in it, the absence loud in a way that made every small sound feel amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock above the doorway. Nora kept her hands folded tightly in front of her, knuckles pale, as if she already sensed what was coming and was bracing herself for impact. "I know about Stacy," I said without preamble. Nora's face drained of color, not the look of surprise, but of something hollowed out, as if all warmth had vanished at once. "What about Stacy?" I placed a folder on the table between us, opened it to reveal printed copies of their email conversations. The papers slid against the wood with a soft, final sound. "I know about the plan. The fake affair with Victor, the psychological manipulation, the divorce strategy, all of it." She stared at the papers like they might burst into flames, her eyes darting across familiar lines she'd never expected to see outside a screen. Her mouth opened, closed. "Reid, I can explain." "Can you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you and your best friend spent 6 months planning to destroy my life for money." It wasn't about money. The words came too quickly, reflexive, as if she'd practiced them. "No? Then what was it about?" Her composure cracked. Tears welled up and spilled over, not the careful, strategic tears I'd grown used to, but messy and uncontrolled. She covered her face with one hand, shoulders trembling. "It was about freedom." she said finally, her voice breaking, about feeling like I could breathe again. Freedom from what? From this. She gestured around the kitchen, the house, the life we'd built together. From feeling like I was disappearing, like I was just Reid Trenner's wife and Julie's mother and nothing else. The words landed harder than an accusation. They reframed everything we'd been for nearly 2 decades into something she'd experienced as confinement. So you decided to destroy me instead of talking to me? She shook her head weakly. Stacy said you'd never let me go. Said you'd use your skills, your connections to make sure I got nothing in a divorce. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her. She looked up then, eyes red and raw. I wanted to believe there was someone who understood how trapped I felt. I studied her face. This woman I'd loved for so long, who'd become a stranger without my noticing. I searched for the person I thought I knew and found only fragments. How long have you been planning this? 6 months, maybe 8. She sniffed, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. Stacy approached me after David went to prison, said she'd been thinking about the investigation, about how it had affected her life. And you decided I deserved the same treatment? I decided I deserved a chance to start over. The simplicity of it was almost stunning. I closed the folder, leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of finality settle into my chest. Well, congratulations. You're about to get that chance. What do you mean? I mean, I'm done. Done with the lies, the manipulation, the games. Done pretending we can fix this. Reid, please. She leaned forward now, desperation replacing calculation. We can work this out. Stacy was wrong about you, about us. I see that now. Do you? I asked quietly. Because from where I sit, it looks like you're just sorry you got caught. That's not true. Isn't it? I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a text message I'd received an hour earlier. My thumb hovered for a moment before I turned the screen toward her. This is from Stacy, sent to you 30 minutes ago. I read aloud. Stick to the script. Reid's bluffing. He can't prove anything without admitting he hacked my computer. Nora's face crumpled completely then, whatever defenses she had left collapsing under the weight of it. She said you'd try to turn me against her. And what did you say? She didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the table, to the closed folder between us. And what did you say, Nora? I said I'd handle it. The words were barely audible. I nodded, stood up, walked to the window overlooking our backyard. The same view I'd enjoyed for 15 years, the garden Nora had planted when we'd first moved in, the swing set where Julie had played as a child, its chains rusted slightly now with disuse. It all looked unchanged, indifferent to what was happening inside. Here's what's going to happen, I said without turning around. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing for divorce. I'm also filing a complaint with the State Bar Association regarding Stacy's conduct, and I'm turning over evidence of this conspiracy to the district attorney's office. Reid, you can't. I can, and I will. I turned to face her, meeting her eyes for the first time since standing up. You wanted freedom, Nora. Congratulations. You're about to be very, very free. The Founders' Day Festival was the kind of small-town tradition that made our city feel like a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. Main Street blocked off to traffic, local businesses setting up booths, families gathering for the annual parade and celebration. I'd been planning this moment for 2 weeks, ever since I'd decided that private revenge wasn't enough. Stacy and Nora had made their conspiracy public through 18 months of careful manipulation. It was time to return the favor. The festival stage was set up in front of the courthouse, decorated with red, white, and blue bunting, and equipped with a sound system that could reach every corner of the downtown area. Mayor Richardson was scheduled to speak at 2 o'clock, followed by the high school marching band and various community leaders. What the mayor didn't know was that I'd volunteered to help with the technical setup, using my Treasury Department credentials to gain access to the sound booth. What the crowd didn't know was that they were about to hear a very different kind of community address. I positioned myself behind the soundboard at exactly 1:45, wearing a volunteer badge and a smile that felt like it might crack my face. The crowd was impressive, maybe 3,000 people scattered across the courthouse lawn, families with children, elderly couples in folding chairs, teenagers clustered around the food trucks. At 2:15, just as Mayor Richardson was finishing his remarks about civic pride and community values, I stepped up to the backup microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," my voice boomed across the square, "if I could have your attention for just a moment." Mayor Richardson looked confused but stepped aside, probably assuming I was part of the planned program. The crowd quieted, faces turning toward the stage. "My name is Reid Trenner. Some of you know me as a forensic accountant here in town. Others know me as the husband of attorney Nora Trenner, or the father of Julie, who plays soccer for the high school." I could see Nora in the crowd, standing near the back with a look of growing horror on her face. Stacy was beside her, already reaching for her phone. "I'm here today to talk about family values," I continued, "about trust, honesty, and the importance of keeping promises." The crowd was listening now, sensing drama in the air the way animals sense storms. 6 months ago, I discovered that my wife was having an affair. Like many of you might do, I gathered evidence, documented the betrayal, and confronted the people involved. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the usual Founders' Day fare. But what I discovered was something much more interesting than simple infidelity. I discovered a conspiracy designed to destroy my marriage, my reputation, and my financial security. I pulled out a folder, held it up for the crowd to see. These are email communications between my wife and her attorney, Stacy Morrison, planning what they called Reid's downfall. 18 months of coordination, manipulation, and fraud. The murmurs were getting louder. I could see people pulling out phones, recording what was quickly becoming the most interesting Founders' Day speech in the festival's history. The affair I discovered? It was fake. Staged to make me look paranoid and controlling. The man I thought was my wife's lover? He was just a convenient victim, someone whose life they were willing to destroy to achieve their goals. I opened the folder, pulled out a sheet of paper. This is from an email sent by Stacy Morrison to my wife 3 months ago. Quote, "Men like Reid follow rules, even when the game is rigged against them. His moral code is his weakness." End quote. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. They were right about one thing. I do follow rules. I believe in evidence, documentation, proper procedures. So when I discovered this conspiracy, I documented it the same way I'd document any other fraud. I reached into my jacket, pulled out a manila envelope. These are DNA test results for my twin sons, Michael and Matthew. Tests my wife demanded I take to prove my commitment to our family. I opened the envelope, made a show of reading the results. According to these tests, I am not the biological father of the twins. The gasp from the crowd was audible. I could see Nora pushing through the people, trying to reach the stage. Now, some of you might wonder why I'm sharing such personal information at a community event. The answer is simple. Because my wife and her attorney made our private business public the moment they decided to destroy my life for profit. I folded the DNA results, put them back in the envelope. The twins aren't mine biologically, but they're still my sons in every way that matters. I've raised them for 8 years, loved them, supported them, been their father in every sense except genetic. Nora had reached the front of the crowd now, was trying to climb onto the stage. 2 festival volunteers moved to intercept her. But here's the interesting part, I continued. My wife doesn't know who the biological father is. According to the private investigator's report I found in Stacy Morrison's office, there were multiple candidates during the relevant time frame. The crowd was riveted now, this small-town drama playing out better than any television show. Which brings me to the real point of today's presentation. I pulled out my phone, held it up to the microphone. This is a recording of a conversation between my wife and Stacy Morrison, made 3 days ago in Morrison's law office. I pressed play. Nora's voice filled the square, crystal clear through the festival sound system. What if Reid finds out about the twins? He won't, and even if he does, it doesn't matter. By then, you'll have half his assets and full custody. He can't prove conspiracy without admitting he hacked my computer. But what about Victor? His life is ruined. Victor was collateral damage. Sometimes innocent people get hurt when you're fighting a war. I stopped the recording, looked out at the crowd. 3,000 faces staring back at me, some shocked, some angry, some fascinated by the real-life drama unfolding before them. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, I present to you the true meaning of family values in our community. Conspiracy, fraud, manipulation, and the willingness to destroy innocent lives for financial gain. Security was moving toward the stage now, but I wasn't finished. One final note, I said quickly. As of this morning, I've filed for divorce from Nora Trenner. I've also filed complaints with the State Bar Association regarding Stacy Morrison's conduct, and I've turned over evidence of this conspiracy to the district attorney's office. The security guard reached the microphone just as I was stepping away. The twins will continue to live with me, I called out over the noise of the crowd. Because unlike some people, I understand that family isn't about genetics, it's about keeping promises. I walked off the stage to a mixture of applause, boos, and stunned silence. Nora was crying hysterically, surrounded by friends and family trying to comfort her. Stacy was nowhere to be seen, probably already on the phone with her own attorney. The local newspaper would run the story on the front page the next morning. The certainty of it settled in as I watched people still milling around the festival grounds in my rearview mirror, unaware that the narrative of the town was already shifting. The truth had a momentum of its own once it was released, and I could almost hear it spreading, through text messages, whispered phone calls, hurried conversations that would grow louder with each retelling. The video would go viral on social media within hours. Someone would repost it with a caption stripped of context. Someone else would add commentary, and soon it would be everywhere, stripped bare and impossible to contain. By evening, everyone in town would know the truth about the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed my life. I drove home through empty streets, the festival still going on behind me. The music faded with distance, replaced by the familiar hum of tires on pavement. Porch lights flicked on one by one as dusk deepened, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was driving back into a trap. The house felt different now, not like a crime scene anymore, but like a place where I could start over. Julie was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in, her soccer uniform dirty from practice, cleats kicked off near the door like she'd come home in a hurry. She stood there uncertainly, hands twisting the hem of her jersey, eyes already searching my face for answers she was afraid to hear. Dad? Emma's mom showed me a video from the festival. Is it true? About Mom and Stacy? I sat down across from her, feeling the familiar ache of wanting to protect her from things she was already old enough to understand. She'd grown up faster than she should have, and it showed in the way she held herself, braced, attentive, ready. It's true, kiddo. And the twins? They're not really your sons? The question came softer, careful, like she was testing whether the floor beneath her would hold. They're my sons in every way that matters. Biology is just science. Family is about choice. She nodded, staring at the table for a moment, then back up at me, absorbing it all with the resilience of a teenager who'd already seen too much adult drama. There was sadness there, but also relief. Relief that at least one thing in her world remained solid. What happens now? I looked around the kitchen, at the breakfast table where we'd shared thousands of meals, at the refrigerator covered with family photos and school announcements, at the window where I used to watch for Nora's car to pull into the driveway. The room felt smaller than it once had, but also more honest. Now we figure out what comes next. The three of us, you, me, and the boys. We'll make it work. And Mom? Your mom made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. S. I didn't react at first. I just held the phone out, letting Julie read it. She took it from me, scanned the message once, then handed it back with a small, disbelieving shake of her head. She still doesn't get it, does she? Julie said. Get what? That you're not the villain in this story. You're just the guy who refused to lose quietly. I deleted the message and put my phone away. It felt good to make that choice without hesitation. Outside, the sun was setting over our neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, court dates, custody hearings, and all the messy business of untangling 18 years of marriage. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, in my grandmother's kitchen, with my daughter, planning a future that finally felt like my own. They'd called me a villain for exposing their conspiracy, but in this town, the villain was the only one telling the truth. And sometimes, that was enough.